I created a monster.
Yeah.
We are witnessing the sellout of football.
It's a completely chilling admission.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it is even more disturbing when you realize that it didn't come from a disgruntled fan or, a government prosecutor or some outside critic.
No, absolutely not. That quote came directly from the man who actually ran the organization, the guy who pulled every single string at the absolute highest level for 17 years, Sepp Blatter.
Right.
When the architect looks at the machinery he built and literally calls it a monster, you are looking at something just completely unprecedented in modern history.
Exactly.
So welcome to this deep dive. Today, we have a very specific, honestly, very intense mission. We are ripping open the hood on a global sports organization that, if you go back to 1974, had exactly $20 sitting in its bank account.
A single $20 bill.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the entirety of their financial firepower at the time.
And today, that exact same organization operates with a projected $13 billion budget. $13 billion just for a single 4-year cycle.
Yeah, it functions with the financial scale, the sheer audacity, really, and the geopolitical immunity of a sovereign nation state.
We are, of course, talking about FIFA. And look, if you are listening to this, you probably tune into the World Cup to watch the beautiful game, right? You watch for the passion, the national pride, the drama on the pitch. But today, we are stripping all of that away.
We have to.
Yeah, we are looking exclusively at the invisible, ruthless machinery operating underneath the grass.
We're analyzing an investigative script from inside the brands, and it details how a strict code of silence governed this organization for decades, how global passion was systematically converted into cold, hard cash, and really how it all culminated in the largest FBI raid in the history of sports.
So to understand how you end up with federal agents kicking down luxury hotel doors in Switzerland, you really have to understand the foundational loophole that made this entire empire possible in the first place.
Right, you have to go back.
Exactly. To find that loophole, we need to rewind to 1974, because this is where we meet the two architects of the modern machine. First, you have João Havelange, a Brazilian executive who operated, well, essentially as a visionary dictator.
And backing him up was Horst Dassler. He was the head of Adidas at the time, and he really acted as the marketing brain of the entire operation.
Right, so Havelange was targeting the FIFA presidency.
Yeah, and at the time, that seat was held by Stanley Rose. He represented the aging, traditional European establishment, because up until that point, international football was treated like a gentleman's cottage industry.
Right, a closed club.
Exactly. The Europeans ran it, they held all the influence, and they just naturally assumed they always would.
But they were completely blind to a structural vulnerability in their own rulebook. It was a rule that Havelange understood perfectly, and it was one he was absolutely prepared to weaponize. The rule was simply one federation, one vote.
Now, on paper, one federation, one vote, I mean, it sounds like the pinnacle of democratic fairness. Everyone gets a say.
It sounds great.
It does. But in practice, it creates a wildly disproportionate power dynamic. It meant that Germany, this massive country with a century of deep football history, immense infrastructure, millions of players, they held the exact same voting power as a tiny Caribbean territory with a population the size of a small rural town.
I mean, let's put that in perspective for a second. It would be like a major multinational corporation deciding that a shareholder with one single stock gets the exact same voting power as a shareholder with 10 million stocks.
That's a great way to put it.
It completely destabilizes the established power base. So Havelange realized he didn't need to win over the European elite at all. He just needed to win over a massive volume of small federations.
Right. And according to the investigation, he went on an absolute tear. He personally visited 86 countries in just 10 weeks.
But he hit a logistical hurdle, didn't he?
He did. A lot of these poorer federations, particularly across Africa and Asia, they just didn't have the operating budgets to even send their delegates to FIFA's voting congresses. They physically could not get to the room to cast their ballot.
So how does he fix it?
Havelange solved the problem with cash. He funded their travel. He paid for delegates from these smaller nations to fly out, stay in hotels on his dime, and actually participate in the vote.
Okay, I have to stop right there, because I want to call this what it is. Historically, this gets framed as an aggressive political campaign.
Right, sweeping the globe.
Right. But if you are selectively funding the exact voters you need to physically show up and cast a ballot to put you in power, I mean, that is not a political campaign. That is a hostile corporate takeover disguised as a democratic process.
That is a perfect analogy. He essentially acquired the voting bloc outright. And it was highly effective. I mean, Havelange defeated Stanley Reichert in the second round of voting, 68-52.
So the entire balance of global football power shifted basically overnight.
Overnight. And once Havelange had the presidency, the culture of the organization fundamentally transformed. Havelange, Dassler, and a marketing executive named Patrick Nally, they realized they were sitting on a gold mine. They didn't just govern a sport anymore. They controlled a universally recognized brand that was vastly undermonetized.
Which brings us to the actual mechanism that turned that brand into billions. It's 1982. Horst Dassler sets up a company called ISL, International Sport and Leisure, and this company becomes the absolute choke point for global football.
Yeah, ISL was granted exclusive control over FIFA's commercial rights. By setting it up this way, they created an unbreakable monopoly.
Meaning what exactly for the sponsors?
Well, if Coca-Cola or Adidas or a massive television network wanted to associate with the World Cup, they couldn't just go negotiate with different regional bodies.
Right.
Every single dollar of corporate capital trying to reach the world's most popular sport had to flow directly through ISL.
And because ISL offered this clean, one-stop shop for global reach, the financial numbers exploded almost instantly. I mean, by 1987, the scale of the revenue is just staggering. They sold the European television rights for 3 World Cups for $440 million.
It's massive.
And the rest of the world broadcast rights for the following 3 tournaments. That hit $2.2 billion.
It was a torrential downpour of cash flooding into an organization that, remember, operated with zero external oversight. No independent regulators, no government audits, nothing.
And Havelange wasn't shy about what he had built either. In 1998, Time magazine asked him if he considered himself the most powerful man in the world. And his answer was incredibly revealing. He said, quote, "The power of football is the greatest power that exists."
Notice his choice of words there.
Exactly. He doesn't say the beauty of the game.
Yeah.
Or the unifying cultural spirit of the sport. He says the power.
Yeah. And years later, in his own obituary, quoting his own words, Havelange bragged about the sheer financial scale of this transformation. He stated, quote, "When I arrived, I found $20 in the vault. When I left assets and contracts worth more than $4 billion.
He viewed that massive capital accumulation as his absolute crowning achievement.
He did. But here is the critical vulnerability in that system. When you scale money that fast, in total darkness, without any structural accountability, the foundation inevitably rots from the inside out.
Which catapults us right into 1998. Sepp Blatter takes over as president, and the revenue multipliers just abandon all logic at this point. The television rights for the 1998 World Cup were $79 million.
Okay.
The projected rights for the 2002 World Cup, just a single 4-year cycle later, were $761 million.
Just insane growth.
That is nearly a 10 times increase in 4 years. But wait, this is where I need you to explain the mechanics of what happens next. Because in 2001, this massive marketing engine, ISL, completely implodes. They go bankrupt with 153 million pounds in debt. How does a company that just locked in over $2 billion in exclusive TV rights go bankrupt? Where did the liquidity go?
Well, it collapses precisely because it wasn't operating like a normal business. ISL wasn't just a marketing firm. It had essentially become the central clearinghouse for a shadow economy.
A shadow economy.
Yeah. They overextended themselves aggressively, trying to buy up other sports rights. But more importantly, when you are the bridge in a system built on maintaining power and patronage, a massive amount of capital bleeds out into the dark. So when the broader market fluctuated, when the tech bubble burst, they had zero financial cushion. The debt called their bluff, and they collapsed entirely.
Leaving FIFA in a massive liquidity crisis. I mean, they are sitting on hundreds of millions in paper projections, but they literally do not have the cash on hand to keep the lights on.
Right.
They are forced to issue a $420 million bond just to survive. Let that sink in for a second. They are generating billions, yet they are taking out what is essentially a massive corporate payday loan against the future revenues of the 2002 World Cup, just to stave off bankruptcy.
It highlights how truly chaotic the internal financial management was. And it is within this exact environment of massive, volatile, unaccountable cash flow that Sepp Blatter launches something called the Gold Program in 1999.
Officially, the goal program was stamped as global development money. The stated public purpose was to build football pitches, provide equipment, and fund academies in poorer countries to grow the game.
Right. But if you look at the actual distribution of those funds, the stated purpose falls apart instantly. The math tells a completely different story.
Let's run those numbers, because they are genuinely jarring.
Let's do it.
Montserrat. It's a tiny Caribbean island with a population of just a few thousand people. They received $278 per resident from the goal program. Anguilla received $69 per resident.
Okay, hold those numbers in your head.
Now compare that to the largest populations on Earth. India, a country with over 1 billion people, received a total of $2 million. China received $1.8 million. If you break that down per capita, it is a fraction of a single cent per resident. A fraction.
Of a cent.
The disparity is staggering. It is beyond staggering. It's insulting to basic logic. You don't allocate $278 a head to a tiny island and a fraction of a cent to 1 billion people if your actual mission is global sports development. I mean, I guess a football pitch in Montserrat doesn't cost 1,000 times more to build. This operates exactly like a political slush fund that just happens to be using a charity's tax ID.
And that brings us right back to the foundational loophole. One federation, one vote. Think about the mechanics of maintaining power here.
Right.
Montserrat holds one vote. China holds one vote. If you are sitting at the top of FIFA, are you going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars trying to buy influence in a massive geopolitical superpower where your money is just a drop in the bucket?
Probably not.
No. Or are you going to send a few $100,000 to a tiny island federation where that specific amount of money makes the local delegate feel incredibly wealthy, powerful, and utterly loyal to you?
It is the ultimate return on investment for vote buying. You maximize your political capital by targeting the smallest possible economies.
Exactly. And we aren't just speculating on the intent here. Domenico Scala, who actually served as FIFA's own head of audit, he analyzed this distribution and bluntly labeled it a system of patronage.
Wow.
Yeah. And by 2014, they had pushed $284 million through this specific program.
So you have a system deliberately primed for patronage, and eventually a system built on disproportionate funding graduates into outright, undeniable wire fraud. Which brings us to the era of envelopes.
Yes, the envelopes.
And we really need to slow the pace down here, because the monumental scale of the betrayal and the brazen criminality, it requires a moment to digest.
Let's focus our lens on the bidding process for the 2010 World Cup. The final race was between South Africa and Morocco, and South Africa desperately needed votes to secure the bid.
This is where Jack Warner enters the frame. Warner was a FIFA Executive Committee member starting in 1983 and a vice president from 1997. For over 20 years, he was the undisputed mob boss of CONCACAF. That's the federation that covers North and Central America and the Caribbean. He controlled a massive, highly disciplined block of those one federation, one vote delegates.
According to the U.S. Department of Justice, in early 2008, $10 million was wired out of a FIFA account in Switzerland. But it didn't go directly to its final destination.
Where did it go?
It passed through a correspondent account in New York. And from there, it landed straight into accounts controlled by Jack Warner in Trinidad and Tobago.
$10 million moved across 3 separate wire transfers. And the cover story they typed on the official paperwork, they labeled it the African Diaspora Legacy Program. I mean, it sounds so incredibly noble. It sounds like charity.
But the reality was pure extraction. And Warner didn't even keep the full $10 million for himself. He had prearranged $1 million cut for another powerful FIFA official, Chuck Blazer.
Ah, Chuck Blazer.
Yeah, Blazer eventually collected over $750,000 of that specific payout.
So we have a kickback, wrapped inside a kickback, routed through New York, and disguised as a legacy charity. But routing that money through New York is what triggers U.S. jurisdiction. And Chuck Blazer becomes the domino that brings the whole house down. In November 2013, Blazer flips. He cooperates with the FBI, pleads guilty, and goes on the record stating that from around 2004 through 2011, he and others on the executive committee actively agreed to accept bribes regarding the 2010 South Africa bid.
And it wasn't just that bid.
No, he also admitted to taking bribes dating all the way back to 1992 concerning the vote that awarded the 1998 World Cup to France over Morocco.
This proves it wasn't just an isolated incident of bad actors, right? It was an entrenched, multi-decade operational strategy. But perhaps nothing illustrates the sheer, unvarnished brazenness of this era better than the events of May 2011 at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Trinidad.
This scene genuinely feels like it was lifted from a mafia script. A FIFA power broker named Mohammed bin Hammam is trying to secure votes to run against Sepp Blatter for the presidency. So he summons delegates to a conference room in the hotel.
And in that room, delegates aren't pitched on policy. They aren't pitched on football development. They're simply handed manila envelope. Inside each envelope is $40,000 in cold, hard, untraceable cash.
$40,000. And while that cash is being handed out, bin Hammam wires hundreds of thousands, eventually over $1.2 million, into an account controlled by Jack Warner. But this time, word gets out. The media starts circling the hotel. Investigators start asking pointed questions. And as the walls are visibly closing in, Jack Warner delivers a quote to his allies that serves as the ultimate confession, masquerading as a proverb. He tells the room, quote, "If you're pious, open a church, friends. Our business is our business."
He is explicitly stating that morality, ethics, and fairness have absolutely no place in their operations. But that specific brand of business was about to be violently interrupted.
May 27, 2015. Dawn at the Bar au Lac. It's this ultra-luxury hotel in Zurich. Swiss police, executing a United States federal indictment, storm the hotel. They physically pull FIFA executives out of their beds, escorting them out behind held-up bed sheets to hide their faces from the press.
It was a decapitation strike on the organization's global leadership. I mean, that morning alone, 14 people were indicted.
Just that morning.
Yeah. By the time federal prosecutors finished adding names later that year, 41 individuals and entities were charged.
The Department of Justice laid the entire blueprint bare. The scheme had moved over $200 million across 24 years, from 1991 to 2015. 24 years of manila envelopes, fake legacy programs, and wire fraud, all made entirely possible by the democratic illusion of one federation, one vote.
When you look at an FBI raid of that monumental magnitude, I mean, it's the largest in sports history. Logic dictates that a massive reckoning is coming. You assume the organization will be humbled, subjected to heavy external regulation, and just brought to heel.
But this is the deep dive where logic takes a backseat to financial leverage. We enter the modern era. Sepp Blatter is forced out. Gianni Infantino becomes the new president in 2016. And instead of a massive structural cleanup and financial restraint, the machine just steps on the gas.
The numbers generated under Infantino make the Havelange and Blatter eras look like they were playing with spare change. In 2022, FIFA posted record revenues of nearly $5.8 billion.
Unbelievable.
Remember those cash reserves that were sitting at $76 million during crisis in 2003?
Yeah.
By the end of 2022, they had ballooned to nearly $4 billion in the bank.
And they are aggressively finding ways to spend it. The budget projection for the current cycle, from 2023 to 2026, has been revised up to a staggering $13 billion. But here's the catch. To generate $13 billion, you have to extract significantly more inventory from the sport.
Right, you need more product.
Exactly. So in 2017, the FIFA Council unanimously approved expanding the World Cup from 32 teams to 48 teams. Then, in 2023, they locked in the format to feature 104 matches. That's up from the traditional 64.
Adding 40 extra matches isn't about improving the quality of the tournament. It's certainly not about protecting player welfare.
Definitely not.
The financial reporting is crystal clear. Adding those matches is a calculated move purely to chase a revenue target of more than £9 billion. Because more matches mean more broadcast slots, more stadium tickets sold, and vastly more sponsor inventory.
Think about the sheer amount of time you spend watching a World Cup, the weeks of commitment. Now realize they essentially added an entire extra tournament's worth of games just to squeeze out billions more in broadcast ads.
Yeah.
And to fuel this massive expansion, they are launching a new Club World Cup in 2025, hosted in the US, with a $1 billion prize pool.
And this requires immense capital backing. Which brings us to the ecosystem currently driving this modern era. We have to look at Saudi Arabia.
We do.
The corporate filings and reported deals reveal a highly integrated, multi-layered financial web.
Let's trace how this money is moving, because it touches every single corner of the sport. In April 2024, Saudi Aramco signs on as a top-tier global partner for FIFA through 2027. The widely reported estimate values this deal at around $100 million a year.
Okay, so that's step one. Then, in December 2024, FIFA's Congress votes to award the 2034 World Cup to Saudi Arabia. It is the only bid left on the table. The process was entirely unopposed.
A process so devoid of friction that 22 international human rights organizations, including Amnesty International, released a joint statement. They formally labeled FIFA's human rights policies a sham regarding this unopposed bid.
Wow.
Now, whether you agree with that assessment or not, the fact that 22 international bodies felt compelled to publish it shows the immense gravity and friction surrounding this capital.
But the financial web doesn't stop at sponsorships and hosting rights.
Of course not.
The Saudi Public Investment Fund, or PIF, was announced as an official sponsor for the 2026 World Cup in North America. Furthermore, a vehicle called Surge Sports Investment, which is backed by the PIF, bought a roughly 10% stake in DAZN for $1 billion.
Okay, let's clearly connect that loop. Because it is brilliant from a corporate standpoint. Saudi money is sponsoring FIFA directly through Aramco. They are the sole bidders hosting the 2034 World Cup. The PIF is officially sponsoring the 2026 World Cup, and their investment arm now owns a massive stake in DAZN. DAZN happens to be the exact broadcaster that is paying roughly $1 billion for the global broadcast rights to FIFA's new club tournament.
It is an inescapable ecosystem of capital.
It really is. It is an unprecedented concentration of financial partnership that essentially makes a single sovereign entity indispensable to FIFA's future growth projections.
Yeah, and as this money gets bigger and more concentrated, FIFA is quietly executing some massive organizational shifts behind the scenes. They are moving a massive operational footprint out of Switzerland and into Miami.
Into Florida.
Yeah, they opened a 75,000 square foot office in Coral Gables. Now, they claim the official headquarters remains in Zurich, but they moved roughly 100 employees across very specific, highly sensitive departments into Florida.
It's the specific departments they chose to relocate that reveal the whole strategy here. They moved the legal department, the audit department,
Right.
compliance, and risk management.
It is genuinely incredible. They pull out of Zurich, leaving behind the Swiss authorities who literally raided their hotel a decade ago and set up shop in Florida.
It's unbelievable.
It is the corporate equivalent of a Vegas casino packing up its entire accounting and compliance department and moving them to international waters like 20 minutes before the State Gaming Commission walks through the front door.
That is exactly what it looks like. It undeniably creates severe geographic and regulatory isolation. Moving your watchdogs thousands of miles away from your executive core, that changes the oversight dynamic entirely. And speaking of the executive core, Gianni Infantino's compensation package jumped to over $6.1 million in 2024.
So we step back and look at the whole board here. We see the $20 bill in the drawer in 1974. We see the ISL monopoly, the disproportionate goal program payouts, the FBI Dawn raids, and now a $13 billion empire deeply intertwined with sovereign wealth, operating its compliance out of a Miami office park.
If we synthesize all of this, the ultimate lesson here isn't just about sports. It is about the mechanics of governance.
Absolutely.
One federation, one vote is the defining structural flaw of the organization. It creates the perfect illusion of democratic equality while engineering an entirely unregulated market for buying loyalty.
Right.
A small island federation is not valuable to the power brokers because of its football infrastructure. It is intensely valuable because its vote holds the exact same weight as a global superpower, and that vote can be reliably traded.
And they mask that trade in the most beautiful euphemisms. Legacy programs, development funds, diaspora initiatives. It is an absolute masterclass in using public relations to cover up systemic patronage.
It really is.
I think the philosophy of the modern era is perfectly encapsulated by two contrasting quotes from Gianni Infantino himself.
Let's hear them.
Right before the Qatar World Cup, facing a barrage of media scrutiny, he famously stated, quote, "Today I feel Qatari. Today I feel Arab. Today I feel African. Today I feel gay. Today I feel disabled. Today I feel a migrant worker."
It was a highly calculated attempt to universally align himself with every single marginalized or criticized group in one breath, trying to create this shield of empathy.
Exactly. But Contrast that public performance with what he told the member federations behind closed doors in 2019.
What did he say?
He looked directly at the people who hold the votes, the people who keep him in power, and said, quote, "FIFA's money is your money."
Wow. And that is the absolute unvarnished truth of the organization. That is the exact philosophy that allowed Montserrat to get $278 ahead, while 1 billion people got a fraction of a cent.
Right.
The money doesn't exist to serve the global game. It exists to serve the electorate that maintains the leadership's grip on power.
So we have traced an unbelievable journey. From a $20 balance in a Swiss vault to a $13 billion global juggernaut.
Yeah.
When you tune in to watch the World Cup, we watch for the incredible athletes, the tension of penalty shootouts, the tears and the triumphs. But the invisible business operating underneath that grass is built on a foundation of traded votes, manila envelopes of cash, and a governance structure that actively and successfully resists any true external oversight.
Which leaves us with one final, lingering question to mull over as we close out this deep dive. If a global sports governance body requires virtually zero external accountability to generate billions of dollars, what happens when sovereign nation-states realize they don't just have to sponsor the sport anymore? If the machine is fundamentally built on buying influence, how long until the entire geopolitical leverage of the world's most popular game isn't just partnered with these nations, but becomes just another wholly owned subsidiary in a sovereign wealth fund's portfolio? When Sepp Blatter said he created a monster, he probably didn't realize that monsters eventually always outgrow their cages. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.